Hello, friends, and welcome to the CUInsight Network. My name is Randy Smith. I'm one of the co-founders of CUInsight.com and also the host of the CUInsight Experience podcast. And it is my job on this show to have conversations with the people that support the credit union movement, to pick their brains and see if we can't find some solutions to those issues that are affecting all credit unions. Hopefully gain a few nuggets that we can learn from and improve our credit unions. I'm really excited today. My guest on the show is Sean Flynn. Sean is the Senior Director of Credit Unions at TransUnion. And I just want to jump right into the conversation because, like I said, I've been excited about this. Sean, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Randy. Happy to be here.
This is going to be fun. I love starting this with just a little bit of background. It was something that I realized over the first few years of the CUInsight Experience podcast. None of us started out going, when I grow up, I want to be in credit unions. I wanted to play for the Detroit Red Wings, right? So it didn't happen. But once we get in here, it sucks us in, right? And there's no place we'd rather be. I know you had credit union experience. This is where you made your career even before you were at TransUnion. But what did Sean want to be growing up, and what inspired you to take the gig as the Senior Director of Credit Unions at TransUnion?
Yeah, so actually, Randy, believe it or not, I wanted to fly planes for the Navy growing up until my sophomore year of high school. When a recruiter told me you're too big and you're too blind.
I was just going to say, you got the glasses, so it's, I'm with you on that, right?
Yeah. And, I started, so shortly after that, I started this program called the Academy of Finance, where I learned about lending and credit and various other elements of the financial system. And at that point I said, well, I'm going to choose finance as my route, because I was pretty well hooked. And, in terms of how I got to TU, my junior year of college, actually, I took a job. I found a job working part-time. I went to college in New Hampshire, and I found a job working part-time at a military credit union up there, service credit union, big shop, and fell in love with the industry. I really haven't looked back since, and been on the vendor side for about 6 years now, which is a little bit different than working in natural person credit unions. But we're doing great things here for credit unions at TU, and to some degree, I think it's a calling for me really to help credit unions, and I'm in a position where I can do that really well here.
That's pretty cool. I'd like to take a step back there. The program you talked about, was that like in high school where there was like the finance type program? Because I know that's, we talk about a lot in credit unions, like that financial education. So often we get all the way through high school, college, we come out of college with a bunch of debt from credit cards because we got a free sweatshirt or something. You know what I mean? That's pretty, so that was in your high school?
Yeah, so it was actually, we were the first class to go through it. They started this thing with they call it the National Academy Foundation. It's out in New York City. And they started teaching high school kids about finance and careers in finance. It was a 2-year program, junior and senior year. And when I graduated from high school, I also received a diploma in financial studies from this National Academy. So junior and senior year, I had 1 or 2 classes in my regular schedule that were finance related, and I had to wear a suit to school 1 day a week. It was kind of neat. It was fun. It was great. And actually, you had to intern in between junior and senior year, and one of the 2 of the big intern hosts were credit unions in New Hampshire.
Oh, no kidding. No, that's fantastic. Yep. What a cool program. I'd not heard of that before. So that's pretty awesome. I'm glad we got to give them a shout out. So let's take a step back. Different time, different place. We actually meet in person at a conference. Crazy thing. I know we're both ready for these again, but give us for people out there who want to know more, give us the elevator pitch. What is TransUnion, and where do you add the value to credit unions?
Yeah, so I think a lot of people think of TransUnion as just like another credit reporting company, right? Credit bureau. They see us on Credit Karma or their apps where they check their credit score, and they think we're just another provider of credit reports and credit scores, and we're definitely not that anymore. We actually feel we do a very good job of arming credit unions with the right tools, and more importantly, the right strategies to create economic opportunity for the communities they serve. Which I think protects the legacy they've built, credit unions have built here in the U.S. for over a century now. And we've been at the forefront of financial innovation. So we've been in those whiteboard sessions with fintechs and some of these big financial pioneers, and we want to help credit unions do the same. For myself and others here at TU and the team that I'm on, the mission is really a personal one, because we care deeply about this industry and we want it to be around for a long, long time. So that's what we're here to do, is provide data and strategies to help credit unions stay around and protect their legacy.
Okay, so that's exactly, as we were preparing for the show, we talked about a few different situations that are really important to credit unions right now. So I'd like to start with what it looks like, to kind of transform that credit union business model through, and you just mentioned the word data, strategy, information. Like, those are all huge topics today.
Yeah, so I think the business model, like in terms of financial products, I don't think the business model changes much with credit unions over time, and it really won't. I think financial products and services are the core offering. I think it's the delivery of those products that has to change, and it has to change quickly. I mean, it's been changing, but it has to change faster. And I say this, like, think about it this way, Randy. Growing up in this industry as a lender, I was always trained to look at a credit report and then also capture the full story of the member, whether that's through a conversation, interviews, whatever. But even during loan officer training, we had to document everything that went through our heads in the loan notes and how we rendered the decision, how we arrived at the decision. I got very good at crafting the narrative and defending those loan decisions, but that's a long process, right? It takes a lot of time, and in a way it's flawed, because I can tell you, as much as I love my credit union members and did for many years, I've been burned by my fair share of them who weren't always the most forthcoming when it comes to, I've got to tell a story now to go get a loan. Sometimes that story is not always the most accurate one. So, fast forward to today, 2021, some of those lenders out there in the digital space have perfected their application process. And they're doing that by getting exponentially more data, Randy, and they're getting more insights on the consumer in fractions of a second. So that long drawn out process of the interview and the talking to the member and getting the story and documenting that, great way to engage the consumer several years ago, right? But today, some of those lenders online are doing that. They're getting that story, and it's an empirically driven story because it's data that's being very carefully orchestrated and in a way that helps tell that story. So I think the secret, to a digital experience really is not necessarily flashy web screens or some bolt-on product to a credit union platform, but it's designing and deploying those carefully orchestrated data strategies to reduce friction in the experience, make it easier for a consumer or a credit union member to engage with the institution. So we always say here at TransUnion that credit unions don't need to win on technology alone. Technology is very important because without it, you can't do certain things. But if they can employ the right type of data at the right time, they can accelerate that digital experience a lot quicker.
What you were saying reminded me of something I was just reading in the past month, but it was talking about when PayPal started moving into that kind of small dollar loans at first and things of that nature. Yep. And like, they weren't pulling credit scores. It was just because they had so much data on how people spent already through PayPal that they were like, you know what? We know they're good for X. And, it was an instant approval, could be in your PayPal account in no time, right? So it's it is interesting to me to think about how we can use that, and then also the how much better it can improve the experience. None of us want to wait very long for anything anymore, right? So it's we want that decision. An add-on question that I'd written down was, how does a solid digital strategy relate to the evolution of credit unions as we move, like you said, not the flashy web page, I mean, it's but it's the the data behind it, and what we do with it, I guess, is probably
right. Yeah, so I think the digital strategy means different things to different people, but I think it has to, for credit unions, it has to mean more than just an off-the-shelf app, right, or an enhancement to a workflow. or it has to be better than being more fintech-like. The fintechs are doing great things out there, but their mission is different in some cases than that of the credit union mission. And so I think what credit unions do really well is they find ways to help people in the community. And I think that credit unions need to be able to do that and engage with those consumers in the way they want to be engaged with. And I can tell you a 37 field loan application with a 24-hour turn time just isn't it, right? And the same goes for deposits as well and any other products and services. It's just got to be more, it's going to be easier to do business with somebody. And sometimes it's not just an app, it's more of where do I see and feel my credit union while I'm on my device or on my computer or whatever.
Yeah, and that's true. And it's been interesting over the, during 2020, the first, let's just even say month to 6 weeks of the, pandemic, credit unions saw the digital adoption from members skyrocket to what they'd been trying to get members to kind of move over to for a decade, right? Like they just overnight, instantly, everybody's like,
Yep.
Where's the app? Where's the remote deposit capture? What's the, that they weren't using. So, yeah, I mean, but now as people get used to it, we're going to want the same experience we get when we go to Amazon or something, right? So
Right.
just quick, easy, seamless. I was interested to ask you this question too, and you'd brought up your history, which I didn't know, which, kind of having that coming up through the lending area of credit unions. So, another key way that credit unions support their members is through the, accessible and affordable lending products. So can you talk about what that looks like today? And you mentioned that like we need quicker turnaround times and things like that. And second, like what trends are you seeing in the credit union industry related to lending?
Sure. Yeah, I think in terms of what it looks like today, I think that the credit unions they're still doing what they've always done really well, which is get people into more affordable products and open doors to new opportunities. That hasn't changed. Credit unions across the country still have some of the best rates in town. They listen to the member, as I talked about earlier. They still have that relationship with those folks in the community, and they're finding more ways to say yes than most. I mean, we tend to see that happen pretty frequently. I think that's a key piece of the value proposition and will continue to be. But in terms of the trends, I mean, things are changing outside the world or in the world around credit unions today. Many parts of the country, credit unions are losing market share. I mean, they still do really well with auto lending and auto refi in particular, to the tune of almost 70% of auto refinances are done by credit unions. So, clearly credit unions are out there finding ways to save people money, and auto refinance and mortgage refinance, those are things that tend to lead the way. But in terms of other consumer loan products, I think it's hard for credit union credit cards and personal loan products to compete at the national level, especially, despite having better terms and better rates, it's harder to compete with the digital experience of some of the bigger card issuers and fintechs and what they're offering. So while the product may be better intrinsically, there's just accessibility continues to be the thing, and relevance of the offer too, right? I mean, if somebody wants to refinance their credit cards and they have $20,000 in credit card debt, and the credit union offers them a $10,000 personal loan, it's not really going to do much on the refinance, and they can go to a fintech and get that $20,000 in about 15 minutes.
Right.
Yeah.
It was interesting recently on our mini-con series. George Hoffheimer was on a panel, and he mentioned an article that he read and it was interesting at the way he came to it, but it was talking about how commercial real estate is shrinking, and it's going to probably continue to. But there could be a boom and this could be great for credit unions from a lending side on refinancing homes or home equity lines of credit, where people that are moving from their office to now having a home office are like, I need to build space, or I need to build, I need that office space in there. And his point was, what do credit unions do well? We're not financing buildings. We could sure help somebody build that home office, right? And I thought so it's interesting what you're saying about like sticking to, maybe we're not going to compete in some areas, but we sure can in others, right? So,
yeah, absolutely.
Before we move through this part of the show, I like to really, ask a couple more forward-thinking questions and kind of that industry-wide, which I was excited to talk to you about for a couple different reasons. Number one, I know how much you love credit unions and the looking at the industry as a whole, and then number two, because TransUnion is an innovative company. So you guys work in a lot of different industries. So my guess is you're going to have some great insight for me here. But if you're to break out the crystal ball, you've talked about fintech. We've seen a ton of disruption in financial services across just across the board over the last few years. None of us think that's going to stop, right?
Yeah.
What trends are you seeing, in financial services overall that credit unions need to be aware of? And where is TransUnion focusing their energy when it comes to innovating to meet all these challenges that are out there?
Yeah, I think the one thing, Randy, that is most interesting at the moment is this point of sale financing. You can finance almost anything on installment loans now, and even if it's not a traditional 12-month or 24-month term loan, sometimes these buy now pay later type financing solutions right from your phone. I mean, I bought a new pair of skis a couple weeks ago, and skiing in Connecticut, by the way, is nowhere near what it was growing up in New Hampshire, but we'll leave that for another conversation.
A little icy.
Yeah, but I got a pair of skis a couple weeks ago, and I could finance them right on my phone in installments. I didn't choose to do that, but as I'm checking out, they offer me 0%, and so and the skis were at my house in 24 hours, which I thought was really amazing too. So I think we're getting closer to this convergence of buying and financing that used to always be two two separate activities. Those two worlds are colliding. They really already have, especially like in the auto world, like that buying and financing is all sort of part of that same process. So how that continues on in the retail front, I think will be really interesting in financial services. And how credit unions respond to it and what they choose to do, yet to be seen. And we're kind of working on how that's going to shake out. But for TU, for us, we're really focused primarily on helping lenders like credit unions just get a more holistic picture of the consumer, whether that's credit data, identity data, like knowing who you're doing business with on the other side of the phone is really important, or the other side of the device. That's like table stakes today. So we're doing so because we think that for us, opening more doors for more consumers to greater opportunities, whether it's putting more people in homes, getting people in cars so they can get to work once people start going back to work, right? Or staying more educated about their finances and knowing how credit works and how to continue to manage those things. That's what's most important to us, is creating those opportunities. And we call that philosophy actually here information for good. And that drives everything we do. And that's a pretty broad answer to your question. I'm not telling you exactly what we're invested in our time, but that's really what we need to be considering, is how do we help people like credit unions and other lenders do more for the consumer and find more ways to open up new doors to new opportunities.
I like that. Information for good. That's good stuff.
Yeah, and Randy, personally, one thing I just want to add, I heard a podcast recently that you had with somebody from a credit union that mentioned this. And, personally, in terms of the future, one of the things I'm personally really interested in, and I figured I'd throw this out there, is I'm closely following the trends in digital currencies. So I think we're up for some big changes when it comes to the future of money and how people exchange currency for goods and services. So not necessarily a TransUnion initiative at the moment, but we I think see that that's going to change this market, and so how that'll impact credit unions will be really interesting.
It's interesting you say that, because just in the past couple months, the amount of big players that are getting more involved and putting significant amounts of money into that space, whether it's Tesla or JP Morgan or whoever happens to be, right? Like, I mean, Visa. So, yeah, it's unbelievable. It will be interesting to watch there too. A question that I brought from the CUInsight Experience podcast, but it's one that I just love to ask is, when you think about credit unions, is there something that you think we need to do better to stay relevant, in a fast changing market like this. And I know you've touched around that quite a bit already. You've had some great nuggets for us so far. But is there one specific thing that you're like, we gotta wake up? This is what credit unions need to do better in your mind?
So I think in our experience, compared to some of our other lenders that we work with, I think credit unions tend to be open to new ideas more often. But time and time again, I hear our credit unions saying, well, it's, capacity, or, we don't have the time to do that this year or next year. If I were back at a credit union today, say I was leading a credit union, leading a team, one of the things I'd really try to do is make time for that creative thinking, and make time for strategy, right? And figure out what are we going to be doing this time next year or the year after. And I think credit unions tend to, like many of us, get caught up in the whirlwind of the day to day because they're so committed to serving their members. But you've got to be able to serve your members in the future too. And I think that just takes some time to sit down and think about and map out and work with your partners, whether it's us or someone else, to get our perspectives or the vendor perspective too, and build something great together. I think that's what our credit unions need to get more comfortable doing.
I am with you on that. It's a question that I added this year to the CEOs from credit unions on the other podcast was, for let's call it 2020, we were often all just putting out fires, right? Or it felt like it, like we just didn't. So like now that we start looking forward into 2021 and beyond, like how do you create that? If you're running at full capacity, how do you create that space to strategically think, like you said? And it's, I'll be honest, it's kind of one of those ones that's kind of stumping people right now, I mean, so I think what you're saying is fantastic. I'd like to wrap up the show and have a little bit of fun, some rapid fire questions like we do on the other show. Get to know you a little bit better. Let people know Sean. So was there a recent purchase? You mentioned the skis, but was there a recent purchase that you didn't know you needed, but now you're like, I don't know how I live without that?
Yeah, when I think about that question, it's the that are currently on my feet, my LL Bean moccasins. I bought them in November because my old house slippers or whatever were getting kind of worn down, and they were probably a little more expensive than I wanted to pay for them. But man, oh man, I've worn them every day since, all day, and well worth the money. So yeah, LL Bean slippers.
They've become your new work shoes. I mean, it's just it's your Zoom shoes. When you hear the word success, who is the first person that comes to mind and why?
Well, so I'm going to pivot here. I think two people come to mind. One is sort of, I'm sure I'll catch flack for this, but Tom Brady. I'm a New England guy through and through, and he is a champion like no one's ever seen. But more realistically, when I think of success, the first guy that hired me in credit unions was a guy by the name of Larry Stuker, and wasn't a credit union guy, wasn't a lender, wasn't even a finance guy, but man, did he know how to build a team and build a culture. And we had so much fun on that team, and I learned so much as a young guy coming up in this space. So I think he's retired now and certainly lived a successful career and had a great time with our credit union. But he's a guy that I adore, and credit really my commitment to this industry to him.
That's pretty cool. I love that answer. The random question: what's the greatest album of all time?
Yellow Brick Road, Elton John.
There you go. Through both shows, Elton John's never been mentioned, and as you said that, I'm like, that's shocking to me, right? Like, so, any books that you're either currently reading, or I like that. Put it this way: that you've either gifted others, or you just think everyone should read the book.
So yeah, I mean, I have a tendency to read a lot of sort of nonfiction business books, which I probably need to stop doing and start getting into like the stuff that's going to work the other side of my brain. But one in particular that has served me well in my life as well as my career is a book called Leading Change by a guy named John Cotter. We read it through my grad school program that I was in, and so many life lessons in that too, just about, how do you help people through tough times and how do you lead through uncertainty. And it certainly has paid dividends for me in the last year.
No, I can imagine. It sounds like it would for everything all that change we've had to all go through the past year. The calendar's empty. What does Sean do to, unwind outside of work? What does that work-life integration look like to you?
Well, clearly, as you know, in the winter months, I like to ski. So that's happened. We taught the kids how to ski this year. My son and my daughter both have picked it up very quickly, which is a pleasure for my wife and I, who have been lifelong skiers. But when there's not snow on the ground, I really enjoy cycling. I know it may not look like it because I have my winter body, but when I get out, there's nothing better than in May and in June and getting out on a 40, 50-mile bike ride on the shoreline. So that's where I really clear my head.
That's awesome. That's fantastic. We'll link to everything we talked about today in the show notes. The last question I have for you is, do you have any final thoughts for our listeners today, or an ask that you'd like of everybody out there?
Yeah, no real ask, but the one thing that I think I try to close up every work day with and end my week with is, did we do something important today? Did we do something that's going to help, change things for the good and for the better? And I really like that Ellen DeGeneres says, be kind to one another. And I think that's one thing that we tend to forget about sometimes, especially in a world where there's a lot of, very polarized situations going on, but be good to one another, right? Be kind, be nice, and enjoy the people in your life, because that's what's important.
Absolutely. Thank you, my friend. Sean, I appreciate you so much for taking time out of your schedule today to be on the show. I can't wait till our paths can cross again soon. We're not that far away from each other, so it's as soon as we get through this thing, we will be seeing each other at conferences and around, I'm sure. So stay well.
I look forward to it. Thank you. You do the same, Randy. Take care.